Greetings, shalom, shalom. This is a man called Gevar. Welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. I felt like it was appropriate for me to give an explanation as to why I go by the name Gevar. It is not my given name, I'll state for the record. My given name is Vincent. So how did I end up for these last 12 years now going by this name Gevar? Well, the full version of the name Gevar is gevaryahu ben Yasharel, which means warrior of Yahuwah, child of Israel, or child of Jacob, son of Israel. And so how did it come about? Well, a little background. You probably know by now about a man named Todd Philibom, who recorded music as the artist named Ethos Di Capo. His music is on my channel, and I had a relationship with this young man, a very close comradeship, if you will, friendship. We talked often after we had met in 2009, and he had adopted a Hebrew name. I believe it was Gevaryahu ben Goria, I think it was. I forget what the last part of it means, but I know Gevaryahu from the prophet Obadiah. Obadiah meant servant or slave of Yahuwah. That was the name he chose. So we talked, had an ongoing conversation, and I mentioned to him that I was desirous of taking on a Hebrew name after my mikvah into the body of Yahushua. So we went back and forth with several ideas, and I expressed to him my desire to keep it in line with what would be respectful of my parents, my given name, Vincent. Out of respect for my parents, out of respect for the name they had given me, in honor of the commandment to respect your mother and father. Even though my father and I did not have a close relationship at all. In fact, we didn't have much of a relationship at all. But that's a topic for a different matter, different discussion. So we talked back and forth, Todd and I did, about various options, and I think it was Todd who discovered this word, this root word from the scriptures that was used frequently in the Tanakh, Gimel Beit Resh, which meant warrior or mighty one. And yes, it is used in the context of the fallen watchers, but it's also used in a great many positive circumstances. For example, Gideon and his mighty men, Gideon and his Gevarim. There's also stories of David's mighty men. There's also references in the book of Enoch about how in the latter days the mighty men of Yahuwah will rise up and do great deeds, and a book of remembrance will be written about their deeds. And it matched up with Vincent because the word Vincent, the name Vincent, means valiant warrior or conqueror. So I adopted that name in about 2012, I believe, right before I began my exodus out of the system and into farming, a self-directed apprenticeship from 2012 to the end of 2016. And so you've been looking at your screen, maybe you've read it perhaps while I babble on. I found this out shortly after changing my name as well. And this brief explanation kind of explains how common law name change is very well established in the common law. A person is free to adopt and use any name that he or she sees fit, so long as it is not done for any fraudulent purpose and it does not infringe upon anybody else. If I were to call myself Elvis and try to pass myself off as a recording artist doing messianic music or something with a rock and roll twinge, that could be pursued as fraudulent. But Gevar, in my estimation, is not in any way a fraudulent name change. And that's based on a court case, Doe versus Hancock County Board of Health from '82. It's important to remember that if you are functioning at civil law, you are a subject of the state and under state jurisdiction. So that's a key factor here, because what I sought to do with the name change was to delineate a difference so that if I was ever dragged into their courtroom and they were trying to identify me, I would be able to say, well, no, Your Honor, that name is not I. I am a man, and I use the name Gevar. You may refer to me as Gevar. However, I am familiar with that name, and I am the attorney, in fact, the secured party creditor, and the beneficiary of the estate named in the all-uppercase version of that name, making sure that I am not functioning at civil law under that name. The problem people have in America today is you are functioning in your society at civil law under that name. And there's a maxim in law, there's a theory in law, idem sonans, I-D-E-M-S, separate word S-O-N-A-N-S, which means sound the same. But there's also a maxim that says disparata non depend jungi, which means unequal things ought not to be connected with regard to names. Now at law, you're not considered to be your name unless you step up and make some kind of confession that you are that thing at law. There's also a maxim in equity that says similar is most certainly not the same. So you have to just be real careful to make sure that you don't allow your given name, family name, which those two are thrown together to create what's called a legal name, and that name is then attached to your CESTA KV, Social Security Trust, and everything in court, everything in the public with regard to the government is a matter in the public, and civil law governs those public matters. So you just don't want to you don't want to allow them to presume that you are that name, because then you get to go for a ride and go wherever they send that name, and sometimes they send that name to the prison system because bonds are generated and they found a way to make money by throwing people behind bars. But even if a civil court is granted permission by statute to change a name by petition and decree, this does not change the common law rule that a man may lawfully change his name at will, and will be bound by any contract into which he enters under that adopted or reputed name, and that he may sue and be sued in that name. And that's a case from 1911. The civil court procedure just makes it a recorded, if you so desire it to be recorded, but you cannot be forced to record it. The federal courts consistently rule that changing your name at will is by common law is clearly a constitutional right. Your family name cannot be regarded as abandoned by your doing that throughout your life, despite your failure to use it in common parlance, or continue to use it privately and or commercially. This is at will. This at will right is guaranteed under the Constitution, and specifically the 14th Amendment, which we all know on this channel that the 14th Amendment is invalid, but I digress. And finally, actually, just two more points. The reason you can change your name at will is because at common law you are the sovereign. This goes back to 1793, Chisholm versus Georgia. The forgotten founding father, John Jay, said that at the Revolution, the sovereignty devolved upon the people, and they are truly the sovereigns of this country, but they are sovereigns without subjects, with only themselves to govern. So it just makes sense that the first decision of a sovereign, whenever they anoint a new sovereign, say for example in England, they ask them what name, or I'm sorry, when they change the name of a man who becomes a pope, the popes don't usually go by their given names. They typically choose the name of a previous pope, and it's either, for example, John Paul I, John Paul II, Pope Benedict XV, 16th, whatever it may be. Francis, I think he's the first. But that's not their real name, that's their changed name. And that's because they are sovereigns, and they are appointed to a potentate head of state position, and they have the authority to declare what their name will be, because the word of a sovereign is law. And of course, you can have multiple names. All of them are perfectly legal or lawful. If somebody questions the validity of your name change, even if discrepancies are found, the burden of proof is not upon you, but the person who questions your honesty, and he must show both that it is not your name and also that you changed it to engage in fraud. So there you have it. There's an explanation of why I use the name Gevar, why I maintain a website called A Man Called Gevar, because I want to make sure that in the civil society which we live in, the public society we live in, that there's never a mistake that I am the legal name that I do business in the public and also in the private. So it's just, for me, it's a way to make sure that I have a way to clarify for ignorant public servants that when they refer to that legal name, Vincent James, and the family name, which in my case is De Palma, that we don't confuse the two. Desperado non depend young guy. Unequal things ought not to be attached. And there's a maxim down here, also in the same document, that basically says, here we go, man is a term of nature, and person a term of civil law. So I want to make sure that there's no discrepancy, no mistake between the personal, the persona, in the Greek, that's mask, and it's taken from the Greek plays where they put a mask on, and they played a character during the play. It was not them. There was a persona that they were adopting for the purpose of the play. So man is a term of nature, so I call myself a man called Gevar, always making sure to let the public agents know I am a man. I don't accept any other titles like person, father, son, doctor, lawyer, banker, attorney. No other title. Not a plaintiff, not a defendant. I don't accept those titles. I'm just going to go with man. That's all I know. That's all I am. Man's a creature of nature, and persona a creature of the civil law. So, there you have it. In under 15 minutes, why I go by the name A Man Called Gevar. Hope that clears up any confusion you have. And I invite you to like, share, subscribe to the channel. Check out the YouTube channel, Gevar at A Man Called Gevar. That's Gevar at A Man Called Gevar. And also the website, amancalledgevar.com. Peace. Shalom, shalom. Baruch Hashem Yahuwah.